reflect that it is Thursday, May 7th, 2020 at 7 p.m. As a preliminary matter, this is Commissioner Chairperson Gray speaking. Before we get started, I would ask that anyone joining us remotely please be patient and respectful as we navigate this meeting remotely. I would appreciate it if you could each mute your phones. Thank you. In order for this meeting to run smoothly, I ask you not to speak out of turn and to wait to be recognized before speaking. As a matter of protocol, please always state your name first when you begin to speak. During the various public hearings, I will recognize the petitioner at the appropriate time, and any questions from the public that were submitted to the Village Hall by noon today will also be heard. Those wishing to follow along with the PowerPoint are encouraged to access the meeting through Tinley Park Television on YouTube, streaming live right now. At this time, allow me to confirm that all members and persons anticipated on the agenda are present and can hear me. Members, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Commissioner Lucas Engel. Commissioner Eduardo Manning.
Present.
Commissioner Tim Stanton.
Present.
Commissioner Angela Gatto.
Present.
Commissioner Marianne Beechison.
Present.
Commissioner Stephen Vick.
Present.
Commissioner Jim Gaskell.
Present.
Commissioner Kayla West.
Present.
Okay, staff, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Barbara Bennett, Commission Secretary.
Present.
Paula Walrick, Planning Manager.
Present.
Laura Gadet, Deputy Clerk. Kimberly Clark, Community Development Director. And Dan Ritter, Senior Planner.
I'm here.
Okay. Please note, throughout the meeting, we expect to have other individuals joining us via phone call pertaining to specific agenda items. Thank you in advance for your patience and cooperation throughout tonight's Plan Commission meeting, which is convening remotely via conference call. This open meeting of the Village of Tinley Park is being conducted remotely, consistent with Governor Pritzker's Executive Order 2020-07 issued on March 16, 2020, which suspends the Open Meeting Act provisions relating to in-person attendance by members of a public body. Specifically, the Governor's Order 1 suspends the requirement in Section 2.01 that members of a public body must be physically present, and 2 suspends the limitations in Section 7 on when remote participation is allowed. The Open Meetings Act, OMA, requires public bodies to allow for public comment. Therefore, this meeting will include public comment via the established protocol. Even if members of the public do not provide comment, participants are advised that people may be listening who do not provide comment, and those persons are not required to identify themselves. Please note that this meeting is being recorded and that some attendees are participating by web or audio conference. All of the materials for this meeting are available on the Village's website, and we recommend that the members and the public follow the agenda as posted. The meeting is also live streamed through Tinley Park Television on YouTube. Before turning to the first item on today's agenda, allow me to cover some ground rules for effective and clear conduct of our business and to ensure accurate meeting minutes. As chairperson, I will introduce each speaker on the agenda. After they conclude their remarks, I will go down the line of members, inviting each by name to provide any comment, questions, or motions. Please hold your comments until your name is called. Further, please remember to mute your phone when you are not speaking. Please remember to speak clearly and in a way that helps generate accurate minutes. Please also start your comments with your name. For any response or comment on any item, please wait until I yield the floor to you. And if members wish to engage in conversation with other members, please do so through me, taking care first to identify yourself and then making your request. After members have spoken, I will afford public comment as follows. The general public was provided the opportunity to submit comments until noon today by emailing their public comment to clerksoffice@tinleypark.org. Additionally, any individual had the opportunity to email the village. Clerk's office by noon today if they wish to speak to an item during the meeting. For those individuals, a representative of the village will call them through the meeting to take their testimony. Finally, simple voice votes will be taken by asking only if there are commissioners who are opposed to the motion that has been made. If there are any nay votes, I will then have the secretary take a roll call vote. Votes on the item motions will be conducted by the roll call vote. Commission Secretary, please call the roll.
Engel? Manny?
Present.
Stanton? Stanton?
Present.
Gatto?
Here.
Aitchison?
Here.
Vic?
Here.
Gaskell?
Here.
West?
Here.
Chairman Gray?
Present. Okay, this is Chairman Gray. Let us now begin with the approval of the minutes. May I have a motion to approve the minutes of the April 16th, 2020 meeting?
Commissioner Stanton, so moved.
This is Commissioner
Engel, I second that motion.
Okay, motion made by Commissioner Stanton, seconded by Commissioner Engel. I will ask for a voice vote. Are there any opposed to this motion? Hearing none, the motion is carried. We'll move on to item 1, the workshop and public hearing for the Thomas Cashy Special Use Variations Plat and Site Plan at 7050 to 7068 171st Street. This first item on tonight's agenda is a workshop which will be followed by a public hearing to consider recommending that the village board grant Thomas Cashy, contract purchaser, a special use permit for a second floor apartment and variations from the zoning code for the property located at 7050 to 7068 171st Street in the B3 General Business and Commercial Zoning District. Site plan approval and a final plat will also be reviewed with this item. The request also includes a plat of re-subdivision and site plan approval. We will begin the workshop. Staff, please make your presentation.
Hi, this is Dane Rutter. Just to cover kind of the initial first basis, this is going to be the workshop and public hearing combined. We don't always do that. In this case, it's fairly unique because of the coronavirus situation. The last meeting was fairly full. Also, we've worked with the petitioner kind of over the last couple of weeks that we would normally be doing to kind of sum up any open items that there might have been and really come up with the plan that's before you guys today. And then lastly, it was fairly essential for the petitioner to move forward on this date, just due to some contract deadlines that he has to purchase the property. So this really helps him kind of stay on path with his current contract that he has on the property. So The existing site, as you guys can kind of see in the presentation, not in very good condition. It's the former sports station on 171st Street. It's fallen up. It's fallen apart in recent years and really kind of in pretty bad shape out there in general. So we're pretty excited for this development to come before you guys, because I think it takes care of kind of a major code enforcement problem that we have out there that's been an issue for at least 2 to 3 years now. So, do you want to go to the next slide, Barb? I don't see it changing yet, but so here's the proposed site rendering of the property, so you can see quite a bit of difference with what we'll go forward with today. Next slide. The original portion of this building actually dates back to before 1938, just going back on historic aerials, so that's a lot later than I would have guessed, but also kind of cool to see that at least part of this building was built in 1938. It's been expanded a number of times, as you can even kind of see in the aerial. You can see the different roofing elements and sections there that have kind of grown over time. So this property dates back fairly far. Most recently, it was the sports station, the sporting goods store, that took up most of the property, and then before that, it was a grocery store called County Foods. So it's been a number of things and expanded over the years. To the north of this property is Midlothian Creek. It kind of runs through part of the property as well, so there is some floodway and floodplain in the property, and that requires some approval through MWRD as well as FEMA. So our engineer and the petitioner's engineer have been working through that to make sure the property meets all of those requirements. The property is zoned B3, which is kind of our general business zoning district. That's the same with the property to the west, which is Olympic Star, and to the east, which is a daycare center. To the south of this is zoned R6, which is, there's multifamily apartments down there, as well as a B4 zoning district, which is the Maher Funeral Home. And then lastly, to the north of this are multifamily residential as well, but the creek kind of separates those two. The creek's fairly grown in terms of trees and brush and growth there. So to the north of this is multifamily, but you can't really see it for the most part if you're on the property. There's a number of kind of existing non-conforming aspects on the site, obviously because of the age. It's been developed through a number of different zoning codes. So this project, like some of the others that have come before you that are kind of infill or redevelopment projects, are a little bit different because there are some economic and technical aspects to it that kind of prohibit being able to meet our current codes, whether that be moving a building or tearing it down. There's just some things that aren't going to work if you have an existing building. So keeping that in mind, we want to meet the intent of the code and get as close as we can to it, but there are kind of some of those non-conforming aspects on the property. Can go to the next slide. The proposed use for this is going to be a first floor that is multi-tenant redevelopment property. The first floor is going to be around 12,000 square feet of commercial space, and that includes them demolishing a portion of the building that's currently there. So there'll be 12,045 square feet at the end of that of commercial space. The kind of driver of this project for the petitioner is the Chai or Chi Central and Cafe, which is a nonprofit that they're looking to establish in this building. It's got a focus on supporting personal, mental, and physical health, And that's kind of the driver of what's really brought the petitioner to this project here. But there are going to be other tenant spaces in the building. The north side of the building is expected to be some kind of a restaurant. You've got a barbecue place that he's looking at and has talked to, and that's kind of what you see on the renderings here. So some kind of restaurant on the north side, and then he's got space between those two tenant spaces that can be either one tenant or up to as many as 3 tenants there. So that are unknown at this time. The second floor, next slide. The second floor will be an 800 square foot, 1-bedroom apartment that'll be constructed there. The apartment will have a separate entrance along the 171st Street frontage. This really will allow the property to be classified as mixed use in terms of Cook County. We all know Cook County property taxes, especially for standalone commercial properties, are really pretty troublesome sometimes in terms of being able to allow for market rents and to do these types of redevelopments. So this is really key for him to be able to get a tax rate on this property that kind of allows him to go forward with it. It also kind of works with their architecture and their vision of what they have for this property. There also might be able to be some use in terms of the nonprofit in this apartment and some kind of connection there. So they're not exactly sure what they're going to do with it yet, but it'll definitely help them be able to complete this project. So the apartment does require a special use. This is in the B1, the B2, and the B3 zoning districts. Allows for apartments or multifamily dwellings to be located either above or in the rear of a principal use. So in this case, it's above the main commercial use that's on the property. The special use is really there. It started in 2005, I believe, to really kind of better align with current planning trends at the time, and that still continue today. To allow for mixed-use properties. This also assists these properties, like I said, in Cook County, really with their tax situation. It allows them to do some reclassification as a mixed-use property as well. So that way their tax rate isn't entirely a commercial rate. Our main concerns with these are really that the mix of uses kind of work together. I think if you were going to have an apartment that's club or something that's noisy or has some kind of negative effects, then maybe wouldn't work as well. We recently had an English Garden requested an apartment on their building, and this is another one where I think it's a good mix of uses when you're talking about a residential use, and then below this would be the nonprofit offices. So kind of two low-key uses that won't really negatively affect each other. So that's our first open item on that one, is for just the special use that's there. From a staff perspective, we really promoted second floor apartments compared to kind of in the back apartments. And that's really to help avoid any type of kind of substandard housing that could be created where you open your front door and you open it into a parking lot or something like that. So this really has a separate entrance. It's above the commercial uses and kind of helps with that separation. The next item is that'll be approved is the Plat of Subdivision and consolidation. So anytime anyone's doing some redevelopment or expanding their property, we really like to see the lots combined, and that avoids any issues in the future where you could have these two properties sold off completely separately and neither could really stand alone by itself. So consolidating the two lots that are out there right now, as well as a cross-access easement will be established to the west of them with the Olympic Star property. I can get into that a little bit more in the site plan portion of this, but at some point there was a cross connection there between these two properties, and at some point that was cut off between the two. It's really kind of caused a circulation issue on both properties, as well as an issue with emergency vehicle access. So a fire truck obviously trying to access either of those sites, or even an ambulance, can cause some problems when they can't really easily circulate through it. So this is kind of step one of two. We really need both properties to have the easement to be able to force that access to happen. But this is kind of step one to really allow that access to be created. The petitioners agreed to it, and they're trying to work with the Olympic Star neighboring property owner to work on getting that access open, as well as maybe some kind of cross-parking agreement as well. So we can't really force that other owner to do it at this time, but the petitioner for this one has been open and working with them to try and get something moving forward on those fronts. Next slide. So there's going to be 6 variations on this. I'll go through them in the next few slides and sections, but they include exterior masonry variation. This is an existing condition that's fairly improved on this. So they use stone, but they won't have any brick on the exterior of the elevation that requires the variation. The second variation is parking. So this is, again, it's an existing non-conforming situation out there, but they've improved upon that situation, but still not enough to wholly meet the code. The third variation is the front yard parking. Allowing parking in a required front yard is not permitted. Again, that's existing. It's an improved condition out there, I think. When you look at it, you'll see that there's not a full curb cut the full length of the lot anymore, so vehicles won't just be backing out onto 171st, which is improved. The fourth variation is the front yard structure setback. Again, that's existing, so they're demolishing part of the building on the east side of it, but the building is still there in terms of its front yard setback, which encroaches slightly. Obviously, existing situation where they don't want to demolish another portion of the building if they don't need to, and that's where the foundation is on it. The fifth variation is constructing a public sidewalk adjacent to the property. This is an existing situation, and again, just something that it would be really difficult to make work in there. There'd be less landscaping, and likely even a possibility that they'd have to remove some of the parking in the drive aisle that's in front of the building to make that work. There's no existing sidewalk on that north side of 171st that it would connect to, so they're asking for a variation from that. And then lastly, the sixth variation is the freestanding sign setback that would allow a new ground-mounted freestanding sign to be 1 foot from the property line. The next slide. The site plan shows you the existing building and site on the left, and then on the right is the newly proposed site. So you can see the proposed site has 12,045 square feet, and they're demoing close to 9,000 square feet. So the existing building, 21,000. So they've reduced the square footage there, really to solve kind of two problems. One, that existing portion of the structure has some structural issues to it that would have to be repaired and are fairly costly. So the beams on the inside and some interior improvements that would be needed to even allow that to be a habitable space. So that kind of solves that one issue. The other issue that the petitioner had was obviously a lack of parking on this site. So that's a fairly big building right now, 21,000 square feet, and there's 44 parking spots on the site. So that is well under our code, and I'll get into that in the parking section. But that was really one of the main reasons there was to get parking, and then two, that portion of the building can kind of just be, there's one section of it that can just be taken out by itself. There is access, so the access currently right now is basically a flat curb cut that goes across 171st Street, so you can kind of just pull into any spot straight from 171st Street. That probably made sense maybe when 171st Street was 2 lanes, but there's quite a bit of traffic there. It's fairly fast, so that's a condition we don't like to see here. We don't like to see it on Oak Park Avenue, and it's really been a code and kind of planning initiative to, anytime you can take those situations away, makes for a better streetscape, makes for a safer sites and safer access to sites. So the new one will have 2 curb cuts on it. One will be a 2-way access. That's on the east side, on the lower east side of the property. And then the second curb cut that's on the west side of the property is going to be a 1-way exit only. And that'll have a do not enter sign that's visible from 171st Street. So, and that's really so that way we could get the parkway landscaping and curbing in there, so we could get the parking stalls in there at an angled rate, and the parking stall widths, the drive aisle widths, all of that meets our minimum requirements. So we're able to not lose any parking spaces up there that are valuable on the site and still kind of get the minimum look and appearance that we're going for at the front of the property. Again, the sidewalk, we would typically want that here. At some point, 171st Street was expanded to 4 and almost 5 lanes when you get up to this portion of it. So the parkway is fairly small out there, and that would take up almost the majority of the landscaping that they have in the front of their property. So we think it's very valuable for them to have that landscaping out there, as well as the parking that's in the front of their building. So, the existing dumpster enclosure is proposed to be reconstructed. They're also kind of changing the design of how you enter and leave that, just with some curbing that kind of helps direct garbage trucks, as well as any emergency vehicles that need to access the site. So because we don't have cross-access currently on both sides with this property and the Olympic Star property, they designed this as kind of the best temporary alternative to that, and that would allow for basically a delivery truck or a fire truck, ambulance, garbage truck, any of them can kind of use that to do a 3-point turn. So it's not the preferred situation, but again, working with kind of an older redevelopment site, sometimes you gotta kind of make things work the best you can, and so that will at least address those problems. There are some outstanding engineering comments on this site, so we've put that as a condition, basically to require engineering and MWRD approval. But they have addressed kind of some of the major issues on this site, which one of those is there's a lot of standing water, there's a lot of drainage issues with stormwater going from this site onto other sites. So the hope is with the redevelopment of the curbing, the sidewalks, the parking stalls, that they will be able to direct the water in a way that will get it to the storm sewer or to the creek as is kind of permitted. But it'll finally start to keep the water on the site and also moving down slopes and not just kind of sitting there ponding in the site. So big improvement there. If you go out there now after it rains, it's pretty much a big puddle. The petitioner, again, has requested those kind of front yard setbacks, and it's just not economically or structurally feasible to meet some of those, like front yard building setback. And then the parking setback in the front yard is really, the parking's at a premium on this site, and they're not looking to lose that. changes they're proposing to make. Next slide. The landscaping, we didn't go through like we normally would kind of go through 100% of what our code requires on this site. And that's just, again, because there's limited space out there in terms of where you can put the landscaping on an existing redevelopment site like this. So what we really aimed to do was dress up that front, put landscaping where we can, make sure there's not any kind of undefined pavement that really doesn't serve a purpose. So I think we've kind of maximized as much landscaping as we can here. Again, it adds a lot to the front. It also adds a buffer to the property to the east. So now that kind of the orientation of the building is going to be to the east and not to 171st Street, any of the light or anything like that should be buffered by that landscape buffer that separates this property to the property to the east, which is a daycare. The specific species and shrubs that they picked on this property are fairly salt tolerant. They're also picked, especially the trees that are under the different power lines. So there's power lines along 171st Street on the south end of this property. There's also power lines that run along the east side of the property line. So the trees have to be fairly specific to live under those power lines and something that's easy to trim and grow. So those specific species were picked, again, to be salt tolerant and grow in kind of those confined conditions. Next slide. So architecturally, obviously, from that first picture I showed you, there's a big improvement out here compared to the kind of the 1950s, 1960s look that you see out there that's fallen apart, literally falling apart before our eyes. So I think the petitioner's done a great job here kind of giving it a new modern design. But he's really working with an existing structure underneath this, so he's trying to pick materials that allow that to kind of work a lot easier. This project also has obviously some high cost to it, so he's looking at how can he be economical, how could he pick kind of the right materials that give it a nice new kind of fresh modern look. And he's done that, but it won't meet our brick requirements to the T, but he has kind of used stone, he's used some high quality fiber cement and cedar engineered wood that'll go on the property that has some high life expectancy to it and some high durability. The appearance obviously is important to the community, and we've kind of kept our masonry requirements in place for these commercial properties. But again, this is an existing property in pretty rough shape, not a new development property where we probably push for that. So I think this is a good improvement. In general, the rooftop equipment is expected to be screened on this. To the east, it'll be screened by the parapet and the barreled roof that exists on the property. From 171st Street, you'll have a parapet as well as the second floor apartment. And then to the north, you have a parapet. To the east is where we have added a condition that just indicates that we'll make sure it's screened to the west. It's a little bit of an odd situation there because you have the apartment and there is a little bit of a parapet over there. We don't think it'll be visible, but it's kind of hard to tell based on the elevations. We also don't have the specific mechanical equipment that they're going to be putting up there. So as the permit comes in, staff will review that and make sure that it's not visible kind of from the right-of-way or neighboring properties. Next slide. I can actually skip 2 slides with some of the signage. In terms of signage, this is just a colored example of what they're proposing to do out there. So they've they kind of plan on using the front canopies as the main wall sign, tenant locations, and then depending on how that kind of middle space gets divided up, they can add up to 2 more signs in there too if there was 3 tenants. So, but depending on how it all gets divided up will depend on those wall signs. So they plan on meeting the zoning code for those in terms of their size and design and locations on the building. The ground sign is, I wish I had a picture on here to show you. It's in pretty bad shape right now. It's just kind of a flag pylon pole sign that's out there, and it's pretty rough shape. They were thinking about reusing that until we found out it's actually in the public right of way. So there's some issues there with ever trying to reuse or issue a permit with something that's located in the public right of way. In terms of private signage, so the petitioner is proposed to take that down and then install a new ground sign that I think really ties in the rest of the property. I think it'll play an important role out there as well because there's really not a lot of frontage anymore to this building, and the main kind of front facade faces to the east. So this ground sign will really function kind of as the eye-catching location for those tenants, especially for the tenant that's furthest and back, that won't really be visible from 171st. So they really are going to have a prominent space on that sign. They also proposed to do an LED message center, again, to kind of be shared by the tenants and to help those tenants advertise services or products or events that they're doing. That sign has proposed a setback variation. Again, currently it's actually a negative 1 or 2 feet into the right of way. So they're proposing 1 feet, and that's usually the minimum we require for the reason that we don't want it to accidentally encroach into the right of way. So they'll be setting that back up about 1 foot. That's about on par with everything else in the area. The Jewel Osco sign, the daycare, car wash, Olympic Star, they're all right around that 1 foot setback mark. The new 7-Eleven, I believe that was 5 feet. So there are some existing reduced setbacks out there in this area just because of the age and kind of the odd nature with the overhead power lines and some visibility issues. Next slide. So parking is obviously has come up a few times in this, and it's kind of what's driven some of that demolition of the portion of the building. So just to give you a quick breakdown, is the existing building is 21,000 square feet. That has 44 parking stalls on the site. So that's actually negative 98 parking stalls compared to what our zoning requirements require for commercial spaces. The new proposal is 12,000 square feet, around 12,000 square feet of commercial, and then the 1-bedroom apartment. So that, and then he's brought the total of parking stalls up to 60 total parking stalls. So our parking requires 82 parking stalls, and there is still a shortage there, but you can obviously see that's been greatly improved by 1, taking down some of the commercial space in the building, and then 2, adding 16 parking stalls. And I think he's jammed just about every single one he can out of his property. So I think it'll be a big improvement compared to what's out there now. The use of kind of those middle tenant spaces is open to what they'll be, but the petitioner is kind of aware that he's going to have to kind of figure out how those tenants work with the nonprofit as well as a potential restaurant that could have a little bit higher percentage of the parking demand on the site. So that what the space that's left there is really going to have to either counter those spaces and their hours or be lower parking demand. Usually what we're concerned about in these is that, if there was some kind of overflow in parking, it might start affecting a neighborhood, or people might start parking on the street. that really doesn't exist here. So there isn't a street you can park on. 171st, there's no parking. And there's really no neighborhood nearby where someone could go park in front of a house or something and then walk to the business, which is really what we're trying to avoid. So I think this site just by itself is kind of going to limit what kind of businesses can be in there. And the petitioner is aware of that. That's why he's tried to squeeze out every parking stall he can. But I think that there's enough there to make the space that he has work. They'll just have to be maybe a little bit more choosy about who those kind of next tenants are and really kind of look at what their parking demand is. And the front yard parking, again, that's not preferred, but I think they've got a much better situation in terms of circulation up there. So there's still front yard parking, but it doesn't back onto 171st Street. There's actually a drive aisle now in front of the site. So that'll really help. And then lastly is lighting. There won't be any poles on the property. There's just wall lights that'll be on the building. Those are downcast, full cutoff, so there won't be any glare going off the site. They're in full compliance kind of with our current lighting ordinance. There is a few portions of the property without the poles that have a little bit lower light percentage than we like. However, those are usually closer to kind of roadways or neighboring properties, so we think those will be sufficiently lit once you take in kind of those surrounding properties and the roadway lighting as well. And then they plan on removing an existing illegal light that was placed on a ComEd pole that's on the property, so that'll be removed as part of the project as well. So all in all, I think a really good project here. This is probably one of the worst properties in the village right now, and I think it could be one of the best after this project. So the petitioner has really done a good job kind of undertaking these plans and squeezing out everything he can on this site. So that is it for our staff report, and I'll send it back to you, Garrett.
Okay, thank you, Dan, for that good, thorough report. This is Chairman Gray. I'm going to ask the Commission if they have any comments or discussion on the workshop portion of this request. Beginning with Commissioner Engel. Any comments?
None at this time.
Okay. Commissioner Manning.
Yes, I just want to, I like the proposed redevelopment of the site. It's going to look great. I just wanted to say thank you to the petitioner to taking on this site and redeveloping it. It's going to be a great asset to Tinley Park. That's all.
Thank you. Commissioner Stanton. Commissioner Gatto.
I'm sorry. I'm here.
Okay,
Commissioner
we'll go
Stanton.
back. I'm sorry. Okay, go ahead, Commissioner Stanton.
Yeah. Yes, I echo Commissioner Manning's comments. I agree 1,000% on the property. Having lived in Tinley Park my entire life, I said I saw this, I said, my God, this is like, nice. Everyone's going to love it. The neighbors are going to love it, and I'm sure, the things will get worked out with parking and that. That was a concern I had, but it sounds like that'll be worked out. And then there's one other thing. The landscaping, I think, is great, and only other thing is possibly where security cameras going to be considered. And that's it.
Okay, thanks, Commissioner Stanton. Commissioner Gatto.
I agree with the other commissioners. I think this is a great project, and I'm really excited to see that somebody took on the project to develop it.
Commissioner Aitchison.
None at this time?
Commissioner Pitt.
Just echo what the other commissioners have said on how nice of a project this is, and definitely be a great addition to the town here. I have nothing else.
Okay. Commissioner Castle.
yes, that's a great plan. I think we should just go ahead with it.
Okay. Commissioner West?
None at this time.
Okay. This is Chairman Gray speaking. My own comments are, it is definitely an improvement, the existing building, and I echo what some of the commissioners have said. I do like the architect's rendering, looks fantastic. And I'm actually glad the petitioner is salvaging a portion of the existing building for reuse. And I do absolutely agree with those curb cuts off 171st Street. They are definitely an upgrade safety-wise. There's no more backing up onto 171st Street from that property, because I used to go to the sports station, and that's just not a very safe condition the way it is now. And I'm glad to hear that the petitioner is opening to working with his neighbors to the west, the Olympic Star, because I do think being able to have open dialogue, and we encourage that with his neighbor regarding the cross access for those fire trucks, and also perhaps a cross parking agreement. So I would encourage that those discussions go forward. I know it's not anything official, but just I'm glad to hear that they are open to discussing that. With that, I have no more comments. Those are my comments. So we will proceed to the public hearing portion now. We do have confirmation of the public hearing notice for this item being published in the local newspaper as required by state law. So at this time, may I have a motion to open the public hearing?
So moved.
Okay, do I hear a second?
Commissioner Gasko, I second.
Okay, so a motion made by Commissioner West, seconded by Commissioner Gaskell. I will ask for a voice vote. Are there any opposed to this motion? Hearing none, the motion is carried. Anyone wishing to speak on this matter will be sworn in before they speak after the staff's presentation. The village staff provided confirmation that the appropriate notice regarding the public hearing was published in the local newspaper in accordance with the state law and village requirements, as I mentioned before. So staff, do you have anything else to add to this prior to the public hearing?
No, we don't. No, I don't even think I mentioned his name. The petitioner is Thomas Cashy. I think he's probably on the line, but I'll leave that up to you. Nothing else to add.
Okay. Thank you, Dan. This is Commissioner Gray again, or Chairman Gray. Commission, do you have any comments or discussion on this matter?
No. Nothing for me.
Okay.
None.
I think I'm hearing none, so I recognize that there are no more comments or discussion on this matter. At this time, would the petitioner, Mr. Thomas Cashay, wish to add any comments?
Other than to say thanks to Paula and Dan for all the work they've put in. We've been working on this for a couple months. See, we've tried to accommodate everything, and the other thing I would add is we are planning on being an owner-occupant. We want to be friendly with the neighbors. We want to make sure the parking works. If it doesn't work, it's going to be our hide that. Thank you again for your comments, and we hope that we can move forward with the project.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Cashy. We appreciate you doing business in Tinley Park. Staff, is there anyone from the public wishing to comment on this item?
No, we did not receive any comments before noon today.
Okay. The Planning Commission recognizes there's no public comments. Again, one last time, commissioners, is there any further discussion on this matter? Okay, I do not hear anybody speaking up, so I'm recognizing that there's no more further discussion. If there are no further questions or discussion, may I have a motion to close the public hearing at this time?
This is Commissioner Aitchison, so moved.
Commissioner Vick, second that motion.
Okay, motion made by Commissioner Aitchison, seconded by Commissioner Vick. I will ask again for a voice vote. Are there any opposed to this motion? Okay, hearing none, the motion is carried. Staff, at this time, could you please review the standards for these requests?
Barb, if you're going to go to the special use standards slide. The standards for a special use really are only related to the apartment that's the subject of the special use. So that is not really anticipated to cause any problems to the existing property or any of the neighboring properties. That's not expected to cause any traffic or issues otherwise in terms of having an apartment on the site. And economically, this really kind of helps promote the redevelopment of this site and its success going forward. For standards for a variation, all the variations being requested are existing non-conforming conditions. They've been improved upon where technically and economically feasible, but there are still some existing non-conforming conditions out there that'll be basically tied up with this and made to be conforming to this project. And then there's the standards for site plan and architectural approval that we have for you guys to kind of consider as you're looking at the site plan and architectural. Those don't require specific standards to be given, but overall, again, a much improved appearance in terms of materials, overall design, circulation, pedestrian access, building and parking. Everything's much improved on the site, and the intent of those standards has been met as much as possible, again, on a redevelopment site. So that's it for the standards.
Thank you, Dan. So at this time, this is Chairman Gray speaking. At this time, there are 4 motions on this item for site plan, variations, a special use permit, and the final plat. May I have the first motion for site plan approval?
This is Commissioner Gatto. I would like to make a motion to grant the petitioner, Thomas Cachet, site plan approval to redevelop the multi-tenant building and site at 7050 through 7068, 171st Street in the B3 General Business and Commercial Zoning District, in accordance with the plan submitted and listed herein, and subject to the recommendation conditions as listed in the May 7th, 2020 staff report.
This is Commissioner Manning. I second that motion.
Okay, motion made by Commissioner Gatto, seconded by Commissioner Manning. Secretary, may I have a roll call?
Engel,
Yes.
Manny,
Yes.
Stanton,
Yes.
Gatto,
Yes.
Aitchison,
Yes.
Vic,
Yes.
Gaskell,
Yes.
West,
Yes.
Chairman Gray.
Yes. Motion carried. May I have a second motion for the variation approval?
Yes, this is Commissioner Stanton. I'd like to make a motion to recommend that the village board grant variations as listed in the May 7th, 2020 staff report to the petitioner Thomas Cachet at the property located at 7050 through 7068, 171st Street in the B3 General Business and Commercial Zoning District in accordance with the plan submitted and listed herein, and adopt findings of fact as proposed by the village staff in the May 7th, 2020 staff report.
This is Commissioner Engel. I second that motion.
Okay, motion made by Commissioner Stanton, seconded by Commissioner Engel. Secretary, may I have a roll call?
West,
Yes.
Gaskell,
Yes.
Vic,
Yes.
Aitchison,
Yes?
Gatto,
Yes.
Stanton,
Yes.
Manny,
Yes.
Engel,
Yes.
Chairman Gray.
Yes. Okay, motion carried. This time, may I have a third motion for special use approval?
This is Commissioner West. I will make a motion to recommend that the village board grant a special use permit to the petitioner, Thomas Catchy, to permit a residential unit to be located above a principal commercial use on the property located at 750 through 768 171st Street in the B3 General District and Commercial Zoning District, in accordance with the plans submitted and listed herein, and adopt findings of fact as proposed by village staff in the May 7th, 2020 staff report.
Commissioner Gaskell, I second.
Okay, this is Chairman Gray. Motion made by Commissioner West, seconded by Commissioner Gaskell. Secretary, may I have a roll call at this time?
Engel,
Yes.
Manny,
Yes.
Stanton,
Yes.
Gatto,
Yes.
Aitchison,
Yes.
Vic,
Yes.
Gaskell,
Yes.
West,
Yes.
Chairman Gray.
Yes. Motion carried. And last, may I have a final motion for the final plat approval?
This is Commissioner Aitchison. I'll make a motion to recommend that the village board grant approval to the petitioner, Thomas Cachet, final plat of subdivision approval for 7050-7068 171st Street consolidation in accordance with the final plat submitted and listed herein, subject to the recommended condition as listed in the May 7th, 2020 staff report.
Commissioner Vic, I second that motion.
Okay, this is Chairman Gray. Motion made by Commissioner Aitchison, seconded by Commissioner Vic. Secretary, may I have a roll call?
West,
Yes.
Gaskell,
Yes.
Vic,
Yes.
Aitchison,
Yes.
Gatto,
Yes.
Stanton,
Yes.
Manny,
Yes.
Engel,
Yes.
Chairman Gray.
Yes. Motion carried. Okay, these items will go to the village board for approval on Tuesday, May 19th, 2020. So, Mr. Thomas Keshi, if you can make note of that and get with the staff on how you can attend said meeting. So with that,
Thank you very much.
for your time. Thank you for your time. Okay, we'll move on to item number 2. The final item on tonight's agenda is a workshop and public hearing to consider recommending that the village board consider a proposed text amendment to the Tinley Park zoning ordinance, clarifying section D.C.11 temporary uses. The purpose of this amendment is to allow for warehouse or distribution uses in a B3 general business and commercial district with certain conditions. I have confirmation of the public hearing notice for this item being published in the local newspaper as required by state law. May I have a motion to open the public hearing at this time?
This is Commissioner Gatto, so moved.
Do I hear a
This is
second?
Commissioner Manny, I second that motion.
Okay, this is Chairman Gray. Motion made by Commissioner Gatto, seconded by Commissioner Manning. I will ask for a voice vote. Are there any opposed to this motion? Hearing none, the motion is carried. Anyone wishing to speak on this matter will be sworn in before they speak after the staff's presentation. Staff, at this time, if you could please proceed with your presentation.
Good evening, everybody. This is Paula. Thank you for participating in this unique way of having our meeting, and you're doing a great job. So what we have before us this evening is a text amendment. We've seen a couple of these over the years, and as you know, as we move through our zoning ordinance and come across particular situations that need addressing, that we present these new ideas to you. And this is such the case this evening. Due to the recent purchase of the abandoned Kmart facility over on Harlem Avenue at 16300 Harlem Avenue by Pete's Fresh Market, which we're very excited about that happening. But it became apparent through our negotiations and discussions with them on their eventual construction and remodeling on that property that they had some immediate needs on the site. They are going to progress through an entitlement of the property that will include the construction of a new Fresh Market grocery store, 74,000 square feet, with a junior box adjacent to that of some 43,000 square feet. And they also want to utilize the abandoned Kmart structure for their own warehousing distribution of their product at about 158,000 square feet, and also take what is now the old garden center outdoor sales area of the Kmart building for additional retail, another 33,000 square feet. So we're pretty excited about all the new development proposals on this property. But as we began discussing this with Pete's Market, who has already purchased the property, and as they started to encounter the stress of the pandemic, like all other retailers in the area, and grocery stores have experienced a unique aspect of that they were finding as they were trying to address some of the immediate needs of purchasing and taking advantage of larger purchases and economy of scale on purchases for COVID-type products, that they were running out of space in their current warehousing units in the more northern suburbs. Because in those warehouses, they currently have a lot of equipment, racking, fixtures that they use for either changing out in their existing stores, or they have purchased some of the equipment for the new stores that they are building in New Lenox and in Madison. So they realized that they could remove those types of fixtures out of those warehouses. They have additional space then to accommodate their grocery product in those warehouses. So they approached the village to see if they could start using this building prior to getting the full entitlement of the property. And as we investigated the current ordinance, we found that we really didn't have a mechanism to address this. Our code does address temporary uses, and if you think about some of the temporary uses that you frequently see in the village, Christmas tree sales, maybe a temporary unit to accommodate sales for residential or vegetation, those kinds of things we routinely accommodate. But there was nothing in our code to accommodate a use like this, the warehouse distribution use. So therefore, we're looking at amending our code to add one more temporary use to what is there already, to provide for warehousing distribution. And when you think about that use, traditionally you see it in our M1 and our MU1 districts, which are more, general manufacturing districts. Yet in our B3 district, which is our most intense business district, areas like Brookside Marketplace, for example, and in this particular shopping center, it is not unheard of to think about emergency situations that they may encounter. For example, if a Best Buy or Kmart, for example, experienced a fire or a flood, they may need some emergency housing of their product and maybe a vacant store out in that area or in an adjacent property in the B3 district. So we felt this was an appropriate accommodation that could be handled within the context of our code and in the context of our B3 district, which traditionally handles truck traffic to commensurate with a warehousing distribution use. Sam's Club, for example, which is in the same center, routinely receives semi-truck deliveries, as did Kmart when it was in operation. Therefore, through our analysis and in looking at the adjacent communities and how they accommodate this, we felt it was appropriate to make a text amendment to our zoning code in our temporary use section to provide warehousing distribution services in B3 districts only. We also wanted to place some conditions on this to make sure that it can be easily accommodated in that district without undue or negative impacts on the adjacent uses. So we are limiting it, or suggesting limiting it to a 50,000 square feet space. Make sure that we have investigated any potential impacts on truck traffic related to this temporary use, and limit it to a 6-month term with the ability to extend it to no more than another 6-month term for a total of 12 months. So the slide you see in front of you actually has the language that we have proposed. I've done a little cleaning up of the text because, for example, the code as it's written now lists our department as the Building and Planning Department, and we have actually been reorganized since this was written, and we are the Community Development Department. So I cleaned that up a little bit. I also wanted to make note that the fact of our ordinance right now, where we define warehouses distribution uses, it includes wholesale uses, and I did not want to include that as an aspect of this temporary use. So if you notice, the language is written such that this provides for warehouse distribution uses with the exception of any wholesale use in the B3 district. And then there's just further, I want to identify the conditions stating that provided that the space be used for warehouse distribution is no greater than 50,000 square feet, adequate delivery truck access and circulation is provided, and the permit is valid for no more than 6 months, and it has the ability for one extension for a total of 1 year. So I think overall this provides an improvement to our code, addresses not only Heat Fresh Market immediate need, but also any potential need that any of our other B3 users might need in the future. So with that, I conclude my report, Chairman.
Thank you, Paula. This is Chairman Gray speaking. At this time, I'll ask the commissioners if they have any comments or discussion on this matter. We'll begin with Commissioner Aitchison.
None at this time.
Okay. Commissioner Vick.
I have nothing.
Commissioner Gaskell.
Nothing at this time.
Commissioner West.
Nothing at the moment.
Commissioner Gatto.
Nothing at this time.
Commissioner Stanton.
Nothing.
Commissioner Manny.
No comment.
Commissioner Engel.
None from me.
Okay. My only comment is I do think it is good that the staff has recommended those conditions in terms of the square footage and then the 6 month with the potential 6-month extension. I think that's good to qualify that. With that, is there anyone from the public wishing to comment on this item? Hearing none, I will ask the commission if there are any further discussion on this matter. Hearing none, I'll also recognize that there is no further discussion. Since there's no further discussions or questions, may I have a motion to close the public hearing at this time?
Commissioner Stanton, so moved.
Commissioner Engel, I second that one.
Okay, this is Chairman Gray. Motion made by Commissioner Stanton, seconded by Commissioner Engel. I will ask for a voice vote. Are there any opposed to this motion? Hearing none, the motion is carried. May I have a motion for approval the temporary use text amendment at this time.
This is Commissioner West. I'll make a motion to recommend that the village board approve text amendments to section Z.C.11, temporary uses of the Village of Tinley Park zoning ordinance, as indicated in the staff report dated May 7th, 2020. The proposed text amendment will provide for temporary warehouse and distribution uses in B-3 General Business and Commercial District zoning districts with conditions.
Do I hear a second?
I'm sorry, Commissioner Gates, second.
Chairman Gray, motion made by Commissioner West, seconded by Commissioner Gaskell. Secretary, may I have a roll call?
Engel,
Yes.
Manny,
Yes.
Stanton,
Yes.
Gatto,
Yes.
Aitchison,
Yes.
Vic,
Yes.
Gaskell,
Yes.
West,
Yes.
and Chairman Gray.
Yes. Motion carried. This item will go to the village board for approval on Tuesday, May 19th, 2020. So at this time, I'll ask staff if there's any further comments?
I don't think we have anything else, but thanks everyone for hanging with us on this one. We'll see you at the next meeting.
Okay, excellent. If there's nothing further, I will entertain a motion to adjourn tonight's meeting.
Commissioner Vick, so moved.
This is Commissioner Engel. I'll second that motion.
Okay, I will take a voice vote. Any opposed? Okay, motion carried. This meeting is adjourned at 8:12 p.m. Take care.